Hello guys, today we are talking about the Victorian compromise. First of all, the word Victorian derives from the name of Queen Victoria, who ruled for more than half a century between 1837 and 1901. During this period, the Victorian upper and middle class promoted a code of values that reflected the world as they wanted it to be and not as it really was. These values were, first of all, duty and hard work that go back to the idea of Puritanism. Well, the Puritans believed in the predestination, the concept of predestination, according to which some men were destined to the salvation of the soul. But that didn't have to be taken for granted because they had to demonstrate in their own life, in their worldly life, to deserve this salvation. In this manner, they had to commit very much. They had to get the economical success. They had to become rich. They had to reach an economical position, and this had to reflect the salvation of the soul. So the salvation of the soul was reflected by the success in their worldly life. The self-made man was the man that made by himself, that became rich only by his own efforts, and that was a matter of pride for a Puritan, for a person of the middle class. Another important value was respectability. Respectability was connected to the idea, to the Puritan idea, because respectability also included a comfortable house, a carriage, regular attendance of church services. Well, the comfortable house, especially built in a rich area of the city, reflected the power, reflected the social status of a person, and so reflected that person deserved the salvation of the soul. So reflected the Puritan idea. The same for the carriage. Good manners, le buone maniere, were another element important to explain respectability, and also severity and conformity to social standards, and the regular attendance of church services and philanthropy. The philanthropy was addressed to stray children and fallen women, but the middle class, the Puritans, were hypocritical when they tried to help fallen women. They had this philanthropic attitude to fallen women, because the fallen women were the single women with a child that, according to the Victorian values, were judged as immoral. As I have told you, first, they created some values that reflected the life as they wanted it to be and not as it really was. And the life for women from the poor classes was very, very hard and difficult. And sometimes they had to become prostitutes because they had to earn money for their family, for their children. Or they became single women with a child because they had been raped, they had been abused by their masters for whom they worked. So this is what I mean when I say their codes of values was not right, was not fair for the other social classes. For the middle class, it was much easier to respect these values. Well, the patriarchal family was another important element of the middle class was another important value. So the man was respected both by his wife and by his children, even though the women had also a great importance in the middle class family as for child rearing and l'educazione dei figli. And education, la loro istruzione. Chastity was another important value, but as I have told you first, this was a very difficult value to be preserved for women in need. And also, so the middle class, the Puritans, tended to emarginate all those people who didn't conform to these values. So a single woman with a child was ostracized by the Victorian society. Patriotism was another important value of the Victorian society that developed into jingoism. I will try to explain. The Victorians, as I repeat again, tried to created a code of values that reflected the world as they wanted it to be and not as it really was. And that is what they did when they misinterpreted the theories by Darwin. Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, and in this book he stated that in the process of evolution only the strongest species had survived, while the weakest ones had succumbed. And the Victorians interpreted these theories as the statement that there are some men who are stronger than others. So this interpretation of Darwin's theories led the Victorians to believe that there are some people who are stronger than others, that there are some races who are stronger than others. And so this justified the concept of the white man's burden. That was an expression coined by Kipling. The white man's burden means il fardello dell'uomo bianco. That meant that the white man, and in particular the British, was stronger and more civilized than other people. And so he had the right and the duty to spread about the civilization, the values, the laws of their own country. And so in this way the British justified imperialism, justified the spreading of their own power all over the world, in Asia, in India, in Africa, in Central America and Oceania. And that led the British to possess 1/3 of the lands of the world at the end of the 19th century. The concept of the white man's burden was introduced by Kipling, that was a writer in favor of imperialism, of extreme imperialism, that was called jingoism. But there were also some other writers, such as Conrad, that were against the exploitation of imperialism, that denounced the exploitation of people by the British Empire in the work Art of Darkness. The concept of the weakest who deserves to be exploited, to be dominated by the strongest was also applied to the industrial system. In fact, the victims, the poor, the exploited workers, deserved, according to the Puritan view, to be exploited, deserved to be the victims of society because they were lazy, they were weak, they had to be dominated by the strong. We talk about Victorian compromise to explain the fact that on one side that this is an age of contradictions. It is an age of progress and welfare on one side and poverty, injustice and social unrest on the other. During the first half of the Victorian age, in fact, the conditions of the poor in the urban habitat were still appalling. People lived in the slums with poor hygiene, epidemics and unemployment. And the workhouses run from the parishes, run by the parishes, did a little to help these people, because they pretended to help the outcast. But on the other side, they mistreated them on the basis of the Puritan idea that the poor were lazy, and so they didn't have to be encouraged to stay in their condition. So the church, the people who ran the workhouses thought that by mistreating the poor, by separating the families, by exploiting the children, they would discourage people from staying in their own condition of poverty. By the way, in the second half of the century, important reforms were acted during the Victorian age, especially thanks to the sensitivity of the Queen. These reforms improved the condition of workers, especially children and women, and new institutions such as pubs, stadiums, prisons, boarding schools were built. Water, gas, lighting were introduced in the cities. And the universal suffrage for men was gradually fulfilled, but we will talk about that next time, okay? See you, bye.